Welcome to the Core of Success podcast. Entrepreneurship, success, health, life, big things are in your future. And now, your hosts, Sean and Mike.
All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the Core of Success podcast, episode 2. We are your hosts. I'm Sean.
I am Mike.
And here we go. So we are going to be talking to you guys about something really important in business and in life. It's one of our favorite topics, and that is sales.
Woo!
So as we told you last time, Mike is our VP of sales, one of the best sales guys on the planet. So we're going to be giving you some granular sales tips. We're also going to be talking about, if you're not in sales per se, how do these things still apply to you? So even if you're not a salesperson per se, stay with us. I think you'll get some value out of this.
For sure. Yeah, everything, oftentimes when I talk to folks, it's the first thing they say that comes out of their mouth, right? It's like, oh, I'm terrible at sales, or
Yep.
I could never do sales. And then when you give them some examples about their everyday life and their position, their job at home, with their children, with their kids, I say, you're selling.
Yep.
You're selling an idea, you're selling a dream, you're selling something. So you're always involved with sales. That's your life, basically.
Yeah,
Something
sales is a
successful.
part of life. And, this is a business entrepreneurial podcast as well, when we relate it to to sales, we talk about sales and business, I'll give you a simple formula. No sales equals no cash equals no business. So
right.
if you don't think it's important, rethink that real quick. But there are a lot of things that go into running a successful business, and oftentimes owners devote their energy to all the other things that go on because they don't want to put in the work in the sales. So here's what I'd say to you about that. If you're not the salesperson in your organization as you start to go through and formulate your business, you got to find somebody who is, because that's what's going to take things to the next level, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. As we know, different entrepreneurs, right? They start off have these great ideas, and they love all the glamour, right?
Yeah.
They love all the great stuff. Maybe going to the trade shows, doing these trips, things like this, right? But when it actually comes down to day-to-day picking up the phone and calling people, they're like, I don't do that. But that's what it's going to take to get to that level, to stay in business, right? So,
100%. It's
so
funny.
true.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was talking to a guy who was starting a company, new entrepreneur, and he was asking me about some of what it takes, because I've been doing this 20 years. He's like, so give me some tips. What are some of the key skills I need? And instinctively, the first one that came to my mind, sales. And I saw his whole demeanor change, right? Just like you were just saying, like, I don't want to do that.
Right.
And I'm like, what, you don't like sales? He said, sure, I love selling things.
Right.
And I said, well, let's pause right there. Everybody loves when you sell something, but that's not sales. And part of what we're going to talk about today is sales is a process, and there's a lot of things that go into that. And that's what most people aren't willing to embrace. But to be successful, I think you can definitely validate this. To be successful at it, you have to love the process.
Yes.
Because it's not an easy process, and you have to go through all these steps to get these sales. But you have to love that. You have to love the prospecting and the follow-up. The sale, really, at the end of the day, is just a result of all the hard work.
Absolutely.
Right? So we love the result, but we don't want the work, and you're never going to get there that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same, like we're big football fans, right?
Yep.
It's the same. Everybody
Cowboys.
loves scoring. Well, yeah, that's one thing.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
a Cowboys fan. I'm an Eagles fan, so we, ever since college, we definitely go back and forth on that. We'll tell you the one funny story one time, how he ran out of the stadium back in, what was that, 1996?
Yeah, the very famous game. Emmett Smith. Yeah, I remember.
3 or 4 times in a row, but... Yeah, so I think the Cowboys went and won the Super Bowl, though, that year.
They did. So we got that. We're talking about winning a lot.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, no doubt. But, when it comes down to, especially like the prospecting, I like what Jeb Blunt says a lot. It's like swallow the frog, right?
Yep.
The first thing you want to do, man, it sucks. You got to do it. But really, it sucks only if you don't have the skills behind it. If you don't train properly, it's like anything else when you're training. But my point about the football before I got sidetracked, because I got all pumped up about the Eagles, is everybody likes scoring the touchdowns, right?
Yep.
Everybody wants to be that guy scoring the touchdowns. But what's it take to get the ball down the field, right? Those plays, those little 3 or 4 yard plays, the little screen pass, dump off. That's what's getting the ball down the field. And that's the thing with sales. very rarely do you have in our business, or really in any business, a one-call close. Like we'd like to talk about that, right? Yeah, I called this guy, man. I closed him on the spot. I'm so great. Really?
Lucky.
Was it you?
Lucky, yeah.
Right. You heat, right time, right place. Awesome. Good for you. We all need them. But that very rarely happens. What's the process? And that's really, I think, as you start to train and you get to know it. And really, sales, like any sport, to me, it's very fundamental.
Absolutely.
Once you have the fundamentals down, once you get that, that confidence that, I got the fundamentals, you can really excel. I think salespeople, yes, they say salespeople born or they made. Could be a combination of the two, but you can definitely take somebody who was like, I'm not a salesperson, and just give them a couple fundamentals and train them, and they could really crush. They could really do well.
I agree. I spent a lot of time coaching youth sports for my son. I did 10 years coaching youth football, and we had a really successful team.
Yeah.
And in all those years, in the years that counted, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we only lost 3 games.
Wow.
Right? So, but when it really came down to it, it was blocking and tackling. That's all that it was. Those were the fundamentals. And when the kids understood that, they all wanted to run the trick play, right? Oh, let's do the halfback option pass. That's your one. That's your when you did that, you got lucky, right? If that play worked, but that's your one call close, like you were saying. But the fundamentals, blocking and tackling that you had to do every day, the teams that did those the best won, right?
But the trick play was also set up by the other plays.
Sure. 100%.
Right? So you can't do all trick plays. The trick plays were set up by those other fundamental plays.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the fundamentals. I mean, you are the expert here, so give us a couple fundamentals on if you're going into sales, then we'll talk about how they relate outside of sales as well. But go ahead, what do you got for us?
Yeah, well, I just want to say, first of all, in the last couple of years, I've really, with your encouragement and others, I've really enjoyed learning about the process.
Yeah. And
the way I've got to that point was to listen to those folks that, to me, were the experts, right? Mm-hmm. Where they're in our field or, like I'm a big fan of Grant Cardone. We use his university, which I really think it's terrific. But also going way back to even like Zig Ziglar days. Sure. I'm a big fan of him, even before I was in sales, just how the positivity and how you go about your life. And coming back to what you said, too, is maybe not a sales commission sales, but that's what I enjoyed about him. Ed Milet, obviously, a really big fan of him and his business practices, Jeffrey Gitomer and things like that. But really, when I come up with my own, and when we look at what really applies, there's a couple, and even Ed Milet talks about this, too. It's really, really critical, is when you're going into something, you want to be certain. That's it. And think about it in your own life. The most certain person always wins. Like, for an example, when you have an idea, like you go back to Friday night, right? You're saying on a Friday night when we were back in college, you didn't want to go out. Maybe I want to go out. I convinced you, come on, Sean, there's going to be girls there. It's going to be a good time. No, I'm going to stay in. I'm tired. I was so, certain that we're going to go out. We're going to have a great time. Like, oh, all right. Now, granted, we probably didn't have a good time. You probably didn't meet any girls.
Probably not.
But, I still was so certain about that, or at least I conveyed that energy to you that brought you over there. And that's really when it comes down to it is if you're that certain, and I say this to our sales team all the time, other folks, you're so certain about your product, about your solutions, about how you can help the customer. You won't take no for an answer. You won't just say, I'm not going to call them back. You won't just say, I'm not going to make that extra call or send that extra email, because you know in your heart that if I can get this product or have my solution, you're going to help that person. You're going to help that company, help that team. So that's where I think you really need to be, is you got to be the expert, be the resource. And again, you're not helping the client, you're not helping the customer until you close them, until they have your product. All the other stuff, send them the videos, calling them, having those nice rapport, and hey, how was the game? That's not doing anything. When you actually help the customers when they have your product in hand.
Yeah, I think a couple of things you said there are interesting. One, your list of sales experts, quote unquote, and you're a very accomplished salesperson in your own right, but there's a real lesson in the fact that you're constantly learning.
Yes.
Right? That's one of the core values here at the Abs Company, that we believe in constant improvement, both business and personal. And as good as you are, you can get high on your own supply, right? Thinking, wow, I know all this. But keep listening and don't follow exactly what these other experts are saying, but take pieces of theirs and incorporate them into your game, and that's how you become you, and that's what you're ultimately going to win at. But when it comes to being certain, I think it was Grant Cardone actually said he had a book, Sell or Be Sold, right?
That's right.
And in that, basically what he was saying is on every interaction, you're either selling them on your solution or your process, whatever you have, or they're selling you as to why they don't need it. And I think what you said is exactly right. The most certain person in that conversation won. Either you're certain that your product or solution is going to solve their problem, or they're certain that it's not. So one of you is going to win that interaction. Absolutely. And it's a process, of course, but over time, ultimately, I think that's right. So you have to be, if you're not certain that you have the right solution for somebody, there's no way you're going to bring that sale over the goal line. So
yeah, and that also allows you to have that confidence to challenge your client, to challenge your customer, and not in a confrontational way, but in a way to say, hold up, let me share this with you. Like we come into it sometimes where in our industry, people are like, well, I don't like this or I don't like that. And to me, it's almost like, is it you or your members or your clients that you're concerned about? Because to me, that's really self-centered for somebody to say, and I wouldn't say this to the client, but I'm thinking, hey man, yeah, what you like, what about your clients? What about your membership? What do they like? And if you're that certain in your product, you can come back and you can challenge that. And oftentimes, again, like you said, the most certain person wins. You can come back and they'll see your perspective. Now, I'm not saying you're gonna close them right there, but at least you start to change that. If you just say, yeah, you're right, let me show you this other product, or let me give you another solution, right away, they sold you and you just gave up. But if you're certain, you'll go through with it. You'll stay in the sale. You'll stay with the deal.
100%. What else?
This one especially I really love because we're both big MMA fans as well. And it's mixed martial arts, right? It's all the different disciplines. You have your wrestling, you have your jiu-jitsu, you have your boxing in there, your kickboxing, everything, right? I think in the 2020 world, you can't just be an in-person salesperson, right?
Well, it's 2019, right?
That is true, but I'm forwarding ahead.
You're going ahead.
I didn't think this would be on until 2020.
It may not. We may be hearing this in 2020.
They may be hearing this in 2056.
Oh, could you imagine?
Woo!
Legacy.
I'll be like 68 at that point. But in the 2019/2020 world, I'll say, for those of you who are keeping score, you got to be great in everything, essentially. If you really want to be a professional salesperson, if you really want to change your life, change your company's life, achieve your dreams and goals, you can't just be a phone person. You can't just be an email person. You can't just be an in-person. I don't call people. I just visit people. You have to be able to be great at everything. And just so I said, you definitely have to be able to prospect, number one. You always have to bring in new business. No matter where you are, how great you are, what your numbers are, the pipeline is everything, right? You have to be great on the phone because I don't care what some folks say, no one answers the phone or no one picks up the phone. You have to still pick up the damn phone and call people. You just do. You have to be great on the phone for sure. You have to be, like you mentioned earlier, the follow-up. You got to be strong. The follow-up is where the money is. There's a ton of people that make that call, they don't get the person, and they just give up. And that's where it dies. That's where the cash is in the follow-up. What we've had a lot of success in is with social, especially LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, again, and some people are like, well, I'm not tech savvy. It's not tech savvy at all. You're just posting some thoughts on there. You may be like with us, we have some installs, some insight, etc. It's being tech savvy. Getting out there, it's not being tech savvy. It's just doing it. Instead of sitting on, because I know some people, oh, you guys are doing great things. I love what you're doing. Man, I wish I could do that. Well, you can. You just say, you just post.
It's free.
That's it. Yeah, and it's free.
It's free.
Right? You got to be great with the in-person. And that is the demonstration. That's the greeting. That's building that rapport. That's for most of us in sales with our DNA. That's probably the one that comes more natural. But you still have to train. You still have to work at it for sure. You have to get referrals, right? You have to be constantly asking for referrals, right? And also in today's 2019, 2020 world, you got to be great with the go-to, with the Zoom meetings and all that. You have to be strong. So these are all the areas. And obviously this all goes back to relationships and how you're getting people on the phone. But you can't just be great at one and then let everything else fall down. You really have to be a master of all these different arts for sure.
Yeah, look, the world is changing so fast, and it's changing faster and faster every day. And if you rely on the skills that got you there yesterday, they're not going to work
No.
today or tomorrow. I have a saying that I say all the time: don't do the same dumb shit.
Yeah.
If what you're doing isn't working, you have to try something new. But to your
Yes.
point, if all you are is the person who can sell on the phone, and that's not working in this day and age, you better learn to do something else. You're not going to be there in sales. Some people aren't great in person, but you and I both believe that the person closest to the customer will always win.
Yes.
We're a little bit old school that way, where we travel all over the world. I'm leaving again for China tomorrow, but I'll do close to 200,000 air miles this year. You'll do over 100,000 because we sit in front of our customers, and that's a skill too. Because when you can really create that relationship, you're going to drive the sales process further. But you can't only rely on that, which is why you mentioned Zoom or LinkedIn or all these other things. So to your point, be multidisciplinary in your sales approach, because that's how you're going to get that level of success. You have to meet people where they are. You can't just call somebody up and say, if they answer the phone, hey, I'm going to come down for a meeting. They may be like, whoa, I don't even know you yet. You got to build some rapport, provide some value. But the last thing I want to touch on that you said, which is critical, and I think most salespeople forget this, it's referrals, right? And that comes back to certainty to me. If you're certain that your product is really a great solution for not only the customer that you made the sale to, but anybody else, you're going to have the confidence to ask them for that referral. But oftentimes you think, I don't want to bother somebody. Well, then maybe you don't really believe you have a great solution. But that referral thing can drive your business further than anything, because it's a warm introduction. It's a greeting from somebody that they trust that isn't you. So that was a great point you made.
Yeah.
Give me number 3.
Number 3 goes back to training.
Yeah.
It's constant daily training. And you and I are big gym guys.
Daily
training. We're big gym guys, right? If you're training for a half marathon, you're training for an event, you're going into an event, you just don't that day wake up and go do it, right?
Yep.
It's the same thing in sales. It's the same thing in business. You have to, as you said, constantly learn, constantly improve. But in sales especially, you get rusty really quick.
Yep.
You go on a weekend, you come back on Monday, you're rusty. You go away for a week's vacation, forget it, right? You come back. You have to constantly train. You have to learn every time. I put a lot of time, as most of us do in today's time, is you put a lot of time, whether in the air or in the car, you have a lot of downtime, right? And oftentimes, I was a big sports radio guy, sports talk radio, and I'm still I love sports, I listen to that. But it's all right, how many times can you talk about, the Eagles preseason camp and contract? This is something where if you can even just put on an audio book, listen to the countless podcasts like this one. This is the content. That's why we're doing this, because we're in the car and we're in the airplane all the time. Just the little nuggets that you can get, the little tips that you can get are freaking gold, man. And even if you use one thing, apply it in today's work that you're doing, take it to your team and share it with them. Man, that is incredible that you'll be able to do that, right? But the training is constant, daily training every day. It's just like anything else. You go to the gym, what do? You warm up before you put on the heavy weight, right? Before you put on all the weight on the barbell. Same thing with sales. You got to warm up. Have your role play. Do your training. Listen to some video, whatever. But train constantly and you will get better. If you don't train, conversely, you will get soft. You will get weak and you will not win. Bottom line, for sure.
Yeah, I was listening to podcast the other day, and they were talking about MMA fighters, to go back to that analogy. And I think it was George St. Pierre that they were talking about, and they were saying that his fight time, the amount of time he actually was competing in the ring, was something like 5 or 6 hours. And when you think about that over a 10, 12, 15-year career, he was actually competing for only about 6 hours. Right. Imagine your whole career lasting 6 hours. But think of the thousands and thousands of hours that he put into training to become the best in the world. And that's exactly your point. You can't train once. You can't train once a week, once a month. You have to train daily. All the greats are doing that. And I know you do a lot of role playing with your team, which is critical, because if you see these obstacles, you see these challenges in training, then when they happen in real life, it's not going to be a big surprise to you. You're going to know exactly what to do in that situation. If not, you're going to look like a deer in the headlights. And again, comes back to that certainty and confidence. If your customer doesn't see that, wow, they really know what they're talking about, probably because they didn't train enough coming into this, they're not going to be certain that you're going to be a long-term solution for them. So you have to anticipate all of these things and train. And when you think you've done all your training, train some more. I've always said in business, one of the worst things that happens to an entrepreneur is when they start making a little bit of money in their business.
Yeah.
Because they start spending more recklessly. They get away from what got them there in the first place. And the same thing happens with salespeople. I've seen it 20 years of my career. As soon as they start making some sales, they stop training, they stop prospecting, they stop doing the fundamentals that you talked about because they think, oh, I've got this. And that is definitely not the case. So if you're out there and you're listening to this, train some more. Mike gave you some great resources of books and training protocols and such. We keep that going.
Yeah, I mean, too, going back to like you talked about when you coached, right? You want to have the practice that is super hard so the game is easy.
Yep.
So when you're training, when you're practicing, not on a customer, not on real money, amongst, your colleagues, with your wife, with your girlfriend, with whoever, your boyfriend, you're training with colleagues. So this way, when you do get a customer on the phone, you crush it. You hit it. You hit all the marks. And you feel good. You're confident. Look, sales, again, isn't rocket science. It really isn't. It's basic fundamentals of what objections or complaints you're going to hear. But you already know they're coming half the time. So when you know they're coming, you feel confident. You feel good. You can stand up straight and say, okay, I know that's coming. Boom, here's what I'm going to say back. So you're not always, and also with that lens you to do is to be, one of my next point is to be a great listener. Because if you're constantly thinking about what I'm going to say next, you're not listening to what they're saying. And a lot of times too, that's what I see in sales folks is they're so quick to product dump, or they're so quick to tell them how great you are, or how great your company is, when you're not even listening to the client. You're not listening to the customer at all. And he or she could be saying something totally different, and you're just going to go off. And just because you have in your mind and you want a product dump, you want to say, what you originally thought. When you're so certain, you can, again, listen to what they're saying and then respond appropriately, right? Accordingly.
Yeah, I think Ed Milet actually said one time, he made a great statement about listening, because it's a skill, right?
Yeah.
We talked about prospecting, follow-up, all these things. Listening is a skill that you need to practice and train on. And he said that most people listen to be interesting, not to be interested. And what he meant by that was you're thinking about the next thing that you're going to say, because I need to be interesting now. But the person kind of, if you're really listening to be interested, the person's kind of directing you where to go next, right?
Exactly.
So practice that skill. Really take in what they're saying to you and guide the conversation in that. You're leading it. You know where you're trying to get to, but you need to be able to respond to what people are saying to you, not just go on to your next point, because nobody likes that, and it's ineffective. So we've got some great ones here. Being certain, have a multidisciplinary approach, daily training, become a great listener. Give me one more.
And this kind of leads to this one is professional attitude.
Yes.
And I say that. And I always say WTF. And it's not maybe what you're thinking. It's why the face.
Why the face?
Why the face? As far as you have this face sometimes when, look, maybe you got hung up on 25 times in a row. And you got this face like, you're crying, you're upset, life sucks. You're going to drive home tonight. Your wife's going to ask you how you did. You made no sales. Oh, shit, the whole world's crumbling down. But again, that comes back to all the things that preceded this, right? You're certain, you're training, you need to be great in all these types of other disciplines, right? But avoid the negativity. If you're around people that aren't doing shit, that are really, they're just watching the news, they're really down, get away from that.
Yep.
It's never going to help you. You have to change the station, man. Put something else on. Make something else happen. Change your mindset all the way. Stay away from the can't-do people for sure. Get everyone in your life, too, to understand what you're doing. Because I know even for me, there was a transition when I left one career and went into being a partner here at the Abs Company and transitioning, where, look, at the end of the day, and this is the truth, when I was at the DOC, 9 to 5, I shut it down at 5 o'clock.
Yep.
That doesn't happen when you're a partner or when you're in sales for that matter, right? If you want to win. And I had to get my wife on board, get my whole family. Look, sometimes dad's going to have to work on a Saturday. Sometimes he's going to have to take calls at night. But you want to have everybody in there. But it's the professional attitude, and it's not just with customers either. It's how you treat your colleagues, fellow vendors, people in your office, folks in logistics, people in the parts department. It's being a professional. And that will just take you to a whole nother level where no matter what people are saying to you, you're reacting, but you know, you're on that professional attitude. You can take it in, you can react, and I just believe that is so critical. And it's also looking sharp, being the part, you know, really being the part of a professional for sure.
Yeah, look, attitude is really at the crux of it. We talked about this in the first episode where we talked about success principles and having that attitude of being grateful all the time. You use the analogy of swiping away the negative in there. Yeah, look, if you look at people's success ratios in sales, they are very small. I know salespeople like to talk about their closing ratio, and I get it, but how do you determine that? Most people will say, okay, this is how many proposals and this is how many closes. I'm a 70% closer. Wow, dude, you're really good. However, how many calls did it take to get you to those proposal numbers? Yeah. If you look at your actual call to closing ratio, you may be a 25, 30% guy. I kind of think of it like baseball, right? Yeah. In baseball, if you can hit the ball 3 out of 10 times, you're in the Hall of Fame. Sales is pretty similar, right? If you could get 3 out of 10 calls to actually close a deal, you're going to be a world-class salesperson. But that attitude, it's easy to let that negativity sink in because, look, I've seen people here on our own team, they'll make 40, 50, 60 calls a day, nobody picked up, and the ones that did hung up on them, right? But to get up that next day and go again, that's what being a professional salesperson is that you spoke about. And yeah, the support system is critical, not only within your family, but within the company. Everybody, we talk about attack continuum, abs company continuum. We'll dig more into that in a future episode. But what it basically says is that there's no department that's more important than another, and we all have to be pulling together. And you have to remember that as a salesperson, treating those people who are going to be helping you, and they're going to do the same in return. So I think that's a great one. So just to summarize these again, we've got being certain, right? You're either more certain than them or they're more certain than you, and whoever that is going to win.
For sure.
Multidisciplinary, knowing all these skills. You can't just be good on the phone. You can't just be good in person. You can't just be good on the tech. Finding ways to touch all of those things because you don't know where that customer is or where that next sale is coming from. So you've got to be great in all those things. But I will say, I'll reiterate this, and we'll talk about it many more times. You and I still believe that face-to-face is where we win. That's why we're old school that way. But there's a lot of steps to get to face-to-face for sure.
Yep.
Daily training. This isn't a once a week, a once a month. This is every day you're training on something. And it doesn't have to be a lot, 15, 20 minutes to yourself, with a colleague, with your dog. Who cares? Train, go over your scripts, go over new things.
Be prepared, man.
Be prepared. And having that professional attitude is what's going to drive you there. So I think those are some really great tips. And we want to kind of bring this back full circle to that person who's saying, you know what, I'm still not a salesperson. Maybe Mike pumped you up and you want to become one. That's cool because we're always looking for great salespeople here at the Abs Company. But at the end of the day, for me, sales is influence. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to move people to take some action that's going to ultimately benefit them. Sure, you're going to benefit by closing a sale, winning a deal, so on, but you're influencing them to make a decision that's going to move them forward as well. And that doesn't matter if you're selling a product, if you're selling a big idea. Me as a CEO, I have to sell a vision to people. My vision has to be big enough that all of you are bought into it, and that's influence. So those are sales skills. Number 2, I think you'd agree with this. Sales is problem solving.
Big time.
You have to find out what people's problems are and provide that solution. And again, that's not just a product, right? If you're a leader of an operations team, well, what are the problems we're having getting the shipments out on time? What are these pain points? You talk about it all the time. At home, you know, if you're having a dispute with a significant other, okay, how can we solve this problem together? That's a sales skill. Sales is hard work. Right? It does not come easy. You talked about the professionalism and those closing ratios and all that goes into that. But it is hard work. But at the end of the day, I think it's fun, you know. But it's the process has to be fun. It can't just be the result, like we said earlier. You have to enjoy that process. But I hope you can see how a lot of these principles apply, whether you are an actual salesperson or you're just someone who does anything else. You can apply these to any area of your life.
Yeah, I think when you say sales is fun, I like that too. And the process is, again, if you look at sports, we go back to MMA, the process of training up to the event, like you said, GSP or George St. Pierre, 5 or 6 hours for his whole career. But I'm pretty sure, it's a grind, the type of practice, just like sales is, but you enjoy it, right? You go to the gym, just like we do. You go to the gym, you love training. Like I really now, as you learn more, as you started to get better, it just becomes more fun, right? And then you want to learn more. It's like anything else. If you don't know how to do something, it's gonna suck. it's going to suck. And that's why we're saying when it goes back to training, man, you got to train. When you get better, it's going to be more enjoyable because that's going to allow you to win more, right? But I agree with you. You have to enjoy that whole process. And if you don't, you better find somebody that does. If you're, leading an organization, or if you're the CEO or so, if this process doesn't get you pumped up, you better find somebody that does, for sure.
Yeah, again, back to episode 1 where we talked about the principles of success. Joy was one of them, right? So you got to find that thing that brings you joy because that's where you're going to be most successful. So I think we'll leave it there for you guys. Great topics, Mike. Thank you for your expertise in this area. Guys, we appreciate you being with us here today on the Core Success Podcast. Remember that the core success is you. So to your success.
Yes, sir. Big things.
See you on the next one.